Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. And I hope you like the new set all around me. Some things never change, though. And the thing that never changes about this show is that it is a real debate, a real conversation. And for that to happen, of course, it needs you to join in. First of all, by telephone on 44208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back. Establish a clear line, and if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0, or I'll have to move on because no one will understand either of us. You can also SMS me at 4478 00008066, or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk. Well, of course, in the Korean Peninsula, the drums of war are beating, or are they? Certainly, the United States political class and its media echo chamber is doing its best to drum up the fears of the people that we are in the midst of a kind of Cuban Missile Crisis, circa 1962. They're trying to make the world believe that the aggressor here is North Korea. So we'll have to examine just exactly who is threatening whom. Why, for example, there is a North Korea and a South Korea. The answer to that for younger viewers is that the United States sent hundreds of thousands of its soldiers and the soldiers of the United Kingdom and others of its allies to invade Korea, to partition Korea. And the United States has refused for more than 55 years to sign a treaty ending the Korean War. Can you believe that? The Korean War officially still exists because the United States will not sign a treaty with North Korea because North Korea demands that there be no nuclear missiles on the Korean Peninsula, that there be no weapons of mass destruction on the Korean Peninsula, that there be no foreign forces on the Korean Peninsula. So the first thing you need to know is that the vast majority of weapons of mass destruction on the Korean Peninsula are American weapons, and weapons in the hands of its puppet state in South Korea, and on American warships, constantly maneuvering and patrolling and wargaming around the seas in the Korean Peninsula, and across the sea in Japan, where the United States maintains nuclear bases and huge concentrations of military power. So who's threatening whom? I'd say it's the West and the United States that's threatening North Korea. What needs to happen is that the parties return to the negotiating table in good faith, that the sanctions imposed on North Korea over and over and over again are withdrawn, and that the needs of demilitarization, denuclearization, defanging all the parties on the Korean Peninsula should be met. That's my point of view. You can tell me yours. It's not the point of view you're going to find anywhere else, but you will find it here. I've been twice to North Korea. I know just how unusual, indeed peculiar, a place it is. I myself would not like to live in North Korea, but the North Korean people have the right to live, and they have the right to live without American weapons bristling all around them, and without the puppet regime in South Korea constantly seeking to undermine them. In Palestine, the Palestinian prisoners, more than 650 of whom are now on hunger strike. The lead hunger striker has been on hunger strike for more than 255 days, a world record hunger strike, and the prisoners are beginning to die. And as an uprising gathers force in the Palestinian occupied territories, Israel has begun again to attack by missile strike the besieged Gaza Strip. They are gunning down people at funerals in the occupied West Bank and the Islamic resistance, Hamas, has called for a third Palestinian intifada. Is it going to happen? Should it happen? What will be the impact if it happens? And what happens when these Palestinian prisoners begin to die seriatim? What kind of impact is that going to have? Not just in occupied Palestine, but across the region. Across a region which is, of course, already in flames in war after war. Saidi's the first man on the line. He's in the north of Ireland, and he wants to talk about Palestine. Saidi, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Hello, salam alaikum, George.
Alaikum salam. Go ahead, sir.
How are you, my brother?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to comment about the Palestinian people. What's going on there, we're not going to blame only the Arab people. We Muslims have to blame each other because the problem is our problem. We Muslims just left them. They are suffering there. Every time they are fighting, no one comments. It's only this country, Iran, just trying to be showing this kind of stuff. The remaining Islamic station, they're just silent. No one comments. Something like this. No assistance.
Well, they're not talking because they're busy destroying Syria. They're busy getting Muslims to kill other Muslims. They're busy pouring weapons and hundreds of millions of dollars into creating civil wars in Arab countries. If they were to focus on what's happening to the Palestinian people at the hands of Zionism and imperialism, that just wouldn't suit their agenda, would it, Saidi?
The Saudi Arabia, they are the evil on the land. We're just thinking of them that they are the good people. They are the one who is sponsoring the stupid people to destroy the Arab country. We all know that. We're just looking at them. But our Creator is going to judge between every one of us soon.
Indeed. Indeed. And that's something that these people will never escape from. That's Saudi Arabia, Britain's best friend in the Muslim world. That's Saudi Arabia, where a prisoner was today sentenced for a crime he committed at the age of 14. He's now 24. The sentence is that a doctor is to be ordered medically to paralyze the young man. Utterly, totally paralyze the young man. That's our friends in the Muslim world. Wouldn't you like to know what our enemies might be? Now, Mohammed is on the line from Egypt. He wants to talk about Korea. Mohammed, welcome to the show.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good to hear from you in Egypt. Tell us what you think about Korea.
I will talk about North Korea.
Yes, go on.
Yeah.
There's only one Korea. There's only one Korea so far as I'm concerned. It's been artificially chopped in half. But go on.
Yeah, George, how are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Thanks, Mohammed. Go ahead.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, the North Korea, the tension with South Korea and America. So I want to talk about it.
Yes.
Yeah. So the U.S. should not interfere about the North Korea and South Korea. Let the South and North to resolve their issue. So this kind of interfering of foreign interfering. So it caused a lot of damage to that Korean Peninsula, and also it will not make the region to be rest in peace. And so it led to China and Russia. So they have to play their role so that they will prevent the region to live in peace and to resolve the case that the case between the North Korea and South Korea.
You're absolutely right, Mohammed. The events in Korea are of great moment to the neighbors of Korea. They're of great moment to Japan. They're of great moment to China. They're of great moment to Russia. But they're absolutely nothing to do with the United States of America, which lies thousands of miles away. But the United States has its Navy equipped with nuclear weapons all around Korea. It has now flown stealth bombers, no doubt laden with nuclear weapons, across the Korean Peninsula just this very day. The United States has military bases in the part of Korea that they themselves partitioned in what they call South Korea. And of course, the United States military presence in Japan is multitudinous. So the United States should get out of Korean affairs, and Korean people and their neighbors should resolve these matters amongst themselves. Mohammed, thanks for that call from Egypt. David's on the line from the United Kingdom on the very same subject. David, welcome to the show.
Hello, George. Thanks
nice
very
to hear
much.
from you. Go on, sir.
George, you're totally right. But, you know, all this news we're hearing, do we know that it's actually true, the disinformation? I mean, if you look at the website, you have a look that they say 12% of people think that North Korea is going to launch the first attack. Then we're told they don't have missiles that can actually reach even Hawaii.
That's right.
Is this not U.S. propaganda to get us all as sheep to think North Korea is going to hit them, then it gives them the right to attack first?
Well, that's a very powerful point, David. I don't believe that either is going to hit either myself, because the remorseless Korean logic as compared to Iraq is this. If you don't have weapons of mass destruction, the United States will invade you. If you do have weapons of mass destruction, the United States cannot invade you. And North Korea, for sure, has weapons of mass destruction. But you're right to say North Korea does not have the ability to hit the United States mainland, as I have read hundreds of times in the last few days in British newspapers and elsewhere. They don't even have the ability to hit American bases in Guam, for example. But they do have the ability to defend themselves. And they are ready to defend themselves. You've seen the video on my video walls here. I wouldn't like to fight North Korea. I don't think the United States fancies fighting them either. Because one of the things I learned from my 2 visits to North Korea is that this is an extraordinarily, absolutely uniquely cohesive political entity and society. It might be wrong. It might even be barmy. But it's absolutely united behind its national goals for the reunification of its country and for the expulsion of foreign occupiers and foreign military bases from its country. And I wouldn't want to tangle with them. And I don't think the United States will tangle with them. What we have to do, David, is get back to the negotiating table and negotiate in good faith without the threat of sanctions and military action by either side. David, thanks for the call. Jim's on the line from Africa, from Cameroon, but on the same subject of Korea. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mr. George.
Welcome. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Actually, I'm very, very disappointed with the United States. A country like the United States is supposed to prepare a table for negotiation for a conflict between 2 neighbors. When I see the United States approving the 2 fighter jets moving to South Korea, navies loaded with war and terrible nuclear weapons,
yes,
I was very, very disappointed. Because I know that as soldiers of the United States, the power the United States is having, the United States is supposed to prepare a table for negotiation for this conflict. This is the beginning of a nuclear war. And as we all know, there is no winner in a war of this sort. The Korean people, the South Korean people, will be the ones to suffer, and not the United States. Because what the United States is doing, it is instead worsening everything around that area. The United States is there disgracing the United States. I don't believe that a country like that, a powerful member of the UN Security Council, should be behaving like that. And the UN is completely out of this. They have nothing to say. They have nothing to contribute. They allow everything to go as the United States wants. Mr. George, this is very, very disappointing.
Well,
very...
I don't know, Jim, about disappointing, because that would presuppose that we had any illusions in the United States in the first place. I'm not disappointed, but I'm angry. I'm angry at how, when the drums of war are sounded by the big powers, the mass media does an absolute wheel with military precision and starts pointing its military guns in the direction that the big powers want them to do. They say that the young man who is the leader of North Korea is mad and he can't be allowed to have nuclear weapons. But George W. Bush was mad, and he had thousands of nuclear weapons. And he was allowed, and we joined him, to invade country after country. This is all about China, Jim. This is all about the United States demonstrating its indispensability and its military prowess on the doorstep of China, which, as I've said here many times, is the overarching, overwhelming US foreign policy preoccupation. Jim in Cameroon, thanks for the call. Abdul is in Durham. He wants to talk about Korea too. Abdul, go ahead.
Hello, George. Thank you.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Just before I speak about Korea, I'd like to speak a bit about the situation, similar situation before the Second World War, when Roosevelt was president of the United States, and the majority of Americans didn't want to go to war in Europe, but he wanted to help out his Anglo-Saxon cousins. So I think the way he went about it was, the German submarines were not attacking the passenger ships, so he couldn't have another Lusitania. So the way forward was to put sanctions on Japan, embargo oil, embargo raw materials, iron, steel, and then the Japanese had no option but to go to war. And then everybody blamed the Japanese for the attack on Pearl Harbor, and then they needed the nuclear bomb. There was no need to use it. They could have used it on an uninhabited island, but I suppose because they had only two, they had to use it on the cities. But anyway, now coming to Korea, it's the same situation. The United Nations has become something, like a tool that the United States can use to put sanctions on countries it doesn't like, whereas it can veto sanctions that are brought against Israel. So now they've sanctioned North Korea, and I think it'll develop into a situation similarly, North Korea and Iran, where, like Japan, they have no option left but to go to war at some stage, So that's the fear. And nuclear bomb, yes, Korea has, I agree. But and they put a satellite into space, I read recently, but I don't think they have the technology yet for making the re-entry vehicle for the nuclear warhead, which will stop it from burning up in space. So I don't think they can hit the mainland yet, but I suppose...
No, they definitely cannot hit the mainland of the United States, and I don't think anyone anywhere, even on Fox News, is actually serious about suggesting that they can. I agree with much of what you said in the second part, Abdul, of your contribution, but I wholly reject your analysis of the situation between the United States and Japan. God bless Roosevelt. If Roosevelt had not entered the war and the United States had not entered the war, and if the Red Army in the former Soviet Union had not, in Churchill's words, torn the guts out of the Nazi war machine, then you and I would be conducting this conversation in German, and we might, both of us, be living in still a fascist society. The Japan which attacked Pearl Harbor was already an expansionist fascist power. Ask the people of China. Ask the people of Shanghai. Ask the people of Malaysia, of Singapore. Ask the people of Indonesia. Ask the people of its Asian hinterland. This was an aggressive, expansionist, fascist, idolatrous society who had placed an emperor as their god. And it was right that the United States placed sanctions upon them. It was a crime that Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, but as you say, it did bring the United States into the war, albeit belatedly, but certainly importantly. Mahmoud is on the line from Sweden. He wants to talk about Korea and Palestine. Mahmoud, go ahead.
Okay, George Galloway. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Go on.
Yeah, it's nice to have me in this
Thank you, brother.
program.
Go ahead.
Judge, before I give my comment about North Korea and Palestine, I have to give you a good, glad tidings that you are the brightest star shining in the sky.
Thank you so
and
much.
it can only be seen by those who have internal sight.
Thank
to make
you.
my point,
Beautiful.
here in
Thank
Sweden,
you.
I've asked highly intelligent people, do you know George Galloway? They say, no, we don't. Contrary to that, I went back to my home country in Somalia. The camel shepherd who are illiterate, they can't read and write. They just only have an FM radio. They recognize, they say, we know three George. One is evil and the son of evil, and the other one is a good George.
Wallah,
and you are the
wallah.
good George. And you,
How beautiful.
I hope you understand those two evil George.
Yes, yes,
George Bush.
I know who they are, yeah. Thank you, my dear Mahmoud.
And they are very, very positive to you, and they are illiterate, but they know about you, and they recognize you, and they are shepherd in the day. They don't have access to TV or internet,
Amazing.
but that's your hard working and justice. It's paying off. That anyone, everywhere, they recognize you.
Subhanallah, subhanallah, thank you. Go ahead, Mahmoud, on Korea and Palestine, because there's a lot of people on the line, but thanks for your words. Go on.
Okay. In North Korea, I think we have commemorated about this, the Holocaust that Nazi did to the Jews and the Gypsies 70 years ago.
Yeah.
Also that we have to commemorate about the Holocaust in Korea. Millions were killed.
Yeah.
We have to commemorate also Vietnam. 3 million and plus were killed. And then we have also to commemorate the Indonesian were killed, 2 million plus Holocaust by Britain and America using this puppet called Zohator to gain resources from Indonesia.
Yeah. And don't forget, Mahmoud, we've had revealed this very week that it was Britain that murdered Patrice Lumumba, the greatest of all African leaders, the elected Prime Minister of Congo.
Congo, yes. So we have to commemorate every kind of Holocaust, not only the Holocaust that took place in Europe alone. And about this ICC court, those people who are in persecuted, Charles Taylor, Relevant Karadzic, and Latko Mladic, the people they have killed combined, there are more than Bush and Blair that they have killed in Iraq. They have to be indicted if ICC court in Hague are justice. And
well, look, Mahmoud, you're absolutely correct, and especially on that last point, that Charles Taylor and these other African petty mass murderers are petty mass murderers compared to the big mass murderers. George Bush and Tony Blair killed 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times more people than Charles Taylor and these other African criminals. It's only Africans that end up at the ICC, at least so far. If you've got a white face, you can kill as many as you like, and you get away with it. Tony Blair's become a multi-millionaire out of the acts of mass murder that he has been committing. Look, we're talking about North Korea and the state of near war that we're told exists in the Korean Peninsula. And we're talking about Palestine, where the prisoners are beginning to die. I'll be back after the news, God willing, in just 3 minutes' time. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. We're talking about the crisis in the Korean Peninsula, and we're talking about the crisis in Palestine. Well, because hardly anybody else is. Certainly not the Arabic channels that are infatuated by Arab conflicts, by Muslim conflicts, but cannot spare, apparently, a spare camera to talk about the crisis which has arisen in the prisons in Palestine, where hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners are on hunger strike, and some prisoners are beginning to die. And when their funerals occur, Israel guns down the people who are mourning the deceased. It is perhaps the beginning of a third Palestinian intifada. Would that intifada distract Arab attention from the Arab wars being fueled by the billionaire petrodollar tyrannies of the Persian Gulf? Adil is on the line from Lancaster, though, talking about our other subject, which is the crisis in Korea. Adil, welcome to the show, my friend. What would you like to say?
Good evening, George.
Good evening, sir.
I believe for America to stay a military superpower is the only way for it to do is to create more tensions, more wars. Do you believe in that?
Yes, I do. I believe that this is a United States trumped up little crisis. They have pushed North Korea into a corner. The people in North Korea are in very dire straits in terms of standards of food, amount of food, and access to oil and other energy resources. They persuaded North Korea to close down their nuclear reactor, which was producing a lot of their electricity needs. They said they would compensate by oil supplies to North Korea, which they then broke and cut off. They're sanctioning, they're surrounding, they're threatening with their constant military maneuvers the North Korean state, which I'm not a supporter of, by the way, although it's a very interesting place, it's a very peculiar one. But this is a United States game aimed at China. That's my view. What's yours, Adil?
That's true. That's what I believe. But what frustrates me is that South Korea, Japan, or Saudi Arabia, Qatar, these countries buy American propaganda, and they allow America to sell their warmongering propaganda to them, and just because they want to sell some weapons and dominate the area, or establish military bases, and all these the public of those nations just sitting there like goats and sheep and watching them and watching their governments to do whatever they want.
Well, there are some sheep, Adil, still in the pen, but most of the sheep have now broken out of the pen and are no longer responding to the barks of the dogs that are sent to police and control them. Most people, thanks to the internet, thanks to Press TV and only one or two other independent television stations speaking up for the voiceless people, most people are searching out the truth, and they know that it doesn't come from Washington. Muhammad Musa's on the line in Nigeria about the Middle East. Yes, welcome to the show, my friend. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. George Galloway. We really appreciate your endeavors.
Thank you, sir.
Especially for those of us in this part of the world.
Thank you.
I would like to talk on the American interference in the Muslim world, especially the Middle East.
Yeah.
You see, the Americans, to me, as a Nigerian, they are suffering from intellectual poverty. They cannot differentiate between right and wrong. Mm-hmm. If you look at the situation of prisoners in Palestine, presently, they are on hunger strike for so many days, and nobody cares even to say sorry for them, especially the Arab world, because of the influence of America within their rulership, which generally it is proven to be negative internationally. And look at the Israeli position in the Middle East. America has allowed Israel to acquire nuclear power, whereas in the other hand, it is restricting Iran to acquire also a nuclear power station, which is based on humanitarian, because we believe that Iran's nuclear is not only for defense, but it is totally for their own consumptions. But unfortunately, America is playing double standard in between, and at the same time instigating all these Arab rulers, especially within the Arab League, for recognizing the Syrian insurgents for a seat, which is a blow to the United Nations, which the United Nations still keep mute. At the same time, if you look at the Rohingya Muslims massacre by the Buddhists, no any international body is taking this thing seriously, while America is still watching and sitting.
Well, not even the OIC, dear brother. Thanks for the call. I need to press on. But I just want to respond to one point that you just made. The sight of the so-called Prime Minister in waiting in Syria addressing the Arab League, where he now has Syria's seat, and talking about the plight of political prisoners in Syria, which is real enough, by the way, but talking about the plight of political prisoners to a group of blood-dripping criminals, talking to the Saudi tyrants about the plight of political prisoners, talking to all these Arab tyrants in the Arab League about the need for freedom and democracy. But only in Syria was enough to turn the strongest of stomachs. Mohammed in Nigeria, thanks very much for that call. We're going to Wales and talking to Mel about Korea. Mel, welcome to the show.
Hi, George. I'm calling from Wales.
Lovely to hear from you. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say briefly, I was in Dublin at the weekend for the Easter Rising commemoration, and you remind me very much of James Connolly.
Oh, well, a Scots-Irishman just like me, but a far greater one. Go ahead.
Thank you. But first, I'd like to say the Western media is full of fear, 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 and it's about fear against Iran, fear against North Korea, and basically I fear America, who are the aggressors. They're fighting wars throughout the world, they've got bases throughout the world, and they're the ones we should truly fear. What's your views on that?
Absolutely correct. And the only people ever to have used nuclear weapons was the United States of America. The United States of America dropped an ocean of chemical weapons on the people of Vietnam, massacring them in their millions and causing birth defects amongst their children 40 or 50 years after the event. The United States has invaded and occupied more than 50 countries since the end of the Second World War. In other words, during peacetime. I'm much more afraid of the United States of America, and so are most people in the world. North Korea has no intention to harm any of us. North Korea's problem is with South Korea. South Korea exists because America invaded Korea, killed millions of people, divided the country, and continues to garrison South Korea with military bases, nuclear weapons, chemical and biological weapons, surround Korea with warships, endlessly patrolling, endlessly engaging in war games. Because the United States maintains a massive military presence in Japan, just across the sea from Korea. Who's threatening whom? Mel, that's the question I'm asking tonight. Well, because it won't be asked anywhere else. Great to hear a female voice, and one who was in Dublin for the Easter celebrations. Mohammed is in London. He wants to talk about Korea also. Mohammed, welcome.
Hi, assalamu alaikum, George.
Alaikum salam, welcome.
And may God bless you, George.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And God bless North Korea. There are the people who can, the Arab, look at this country. I'm talking about the Arab rulers. I'm not talking about the Arab people. The Arab people now that are like a sheep, as you mentioned earlier on. But about the Arab rulers, when they're going to look at at North Korea, which they have no resources, and yet they are face to face to this big Zionist evil, a big Zionist criminal. That's the Arab. What can I say, George? You know
well,
more
no, you've
than
said
I do.
it. You've said it, Mohammed, very powerfully. Look, I don't agree with the North Korean political system, and I've been there. I've seen it up close and personal. But there have been achievements in North Korea. They do have a satellite circling the Earth. They have built a nuclear power industry, even though they suspended it on false promises from President Clinton and other US statesmen. They do have a cohesive, pristine, actually, innocent culture, a culture that has not been penetrated by globalization and by Western mores. And it's very interesting to see, but I wouldn't like to live there. And I'm not advocating their system, not least because they certainly don't believe in God in North Korea, Mohammed. But they are courageously refusing to bow the knee to big power diktat and domination. And that is something that other people could take a lesson from. We're talking about the Palestinian prisoners. We're talking about the crisis in the Korean Peninsula. And Wahdat is on the line from Kabul in occupied Afghanistan to talk about Palestine. Wahdat, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, sir. First of all, I would like to wish you last week your anniversary.
Thank you so much.
I couldn't make to call you last week.
Thank you, sir.
Well, there are lots of questions about the Arab world and Palestine. My question and my view about the Palestine is that this land where Israel is made belong to Palestine, and everybody knows, even the Western world knows this.
Yes.
And still the Palestine, still the Israel attack Palestine, and they're killing innocent people. They're not killing the tourists there. They're killing the innocent people, blaming them that they're terrorists. I'm talking as a human, not as a Muslim. What the United Nations, which they claim every time when there's a small attack in Western countries, they blame all the people. That there are lots of TV channels, lots of talking about the attack and everything. So, and the second view about is the Arab world promised Palestine $500 million. And like the last time, they also promised, but do you think this money will go to the people who need this money?
No, first of all, I don't think the money will arrive at all. The vast majority of it will not arrive at all. These Arab rulers, who are almost without exception criminals of one variety or another, cannot be trusted to live up to their promises to the Palestinian people, not least because they're expending billions of dollars to try and destroy an Arab country called Syria. And they're openly collaborating with the United States and Israel in the destruction of Syria. So I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. And any money that does arrive, I have very real question marks as to the use to which it would be put. Because I have just been reading about, I hate to say this. Believe me, this makes me almost want to weep when I say this. Because I was in Qayyam prison in the south of Lebanon just 48 hours ago on a mountaintop amidst the rubble and the barbed wire, where Israel tortured and murdered Lebanese and Palestinian prisoners, tortured them to death in this prison camp. And then I read that the Palestinian security services in the West Bank are accused of torturing Palestinian prisoners. It is almost unbelievable. We used to say, how could something calling itself the Jewish state, after what happened to the Jews, commit such atrocities against the Palestinian people? So what question can I ask of Mahmoud Abbas's security services in the West Bank, accused in the British newspapers from the horse's mouth of committing acts of heinous torture against Palestinian prisoners in their custody? Wahdat in Kabul, thanks for the call. Mohammed's on the line from Africa, from Ghana, wants to talk about Korea. Mohammed, welcome. Mohammed, welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Go on.
Yeah. I want to talk about North Korea and South and America.
Go on.
Yeah, welcome. Good evening. Welcome. Good evening.
Good evening, but be quick, sir. Come on, we've got a lot of people on the line. Go on.
Yeah. I don't understand why this American isn't anything happened between South Korea and the North Korea, and then American even Palestine, and then look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan.
Exactly, they're everywhere. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization has stretched to the Mediterranean, stretched to Libya, stretched to Syria, is in Turkey. I mean, the whole idea that the United States has any right to interfere in Korea is absolutely absurd. What happens in Korea is a matter for the Korean people. It's a matter for their neighbors, China and Russia. You could even argue it's a matter for their neighbor, Japan, although the atrocities committed by fascist Japan in its occupation of Korea probably renders them persona non grata. But the last people in the whole world who have any right to be dictating events in Korea are Hillary Clinton and John Kerry and Barack Obama. Mohammed, thanks for the call. Abdi's in London. He wants to talk about the current world situation. And because I'd like to hear it, he's on the line next. Abdi, go ahead.
Very much, Mr. George Galloway, for having me.
Welcome.
The last time I've spoken to you was 2011, when there was a lot of drought happening in Somalia.
Yeah.
And reality today, I can see you that you are very handsome and you are very healthy, even more than that time. And God bless you.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Thank you.
But the other thing is the reality, the situation in the world. I don't think that this world will continue in the same way that it continues itself. The world, which is full of blood, I'm sure that the world is going to reform itself. Whoever is the evil, whether it is North Korea, whether it is America, or whether it is Middle East, there is a sign, reality, which is, we can see that even in the Syria, which is the great thing in Syria. There is a reform also in the Syria. So that we have to understand that also what's happening in Syria is one of the signs. This sign shows that there's nothing that bad is happening in Syria. But whatever happening in Syria is one of the signs also. It's one of the miracles, reality. There is a good behind it. So the evil will disappear from this world. And I'm sure that the earth, the world itself, is going to reform itself without being reformed by anybody.
Well, I believe that also. I am an optimist about the human condition. We are passing through dark and dangerous times. Oftentimes it seems a kind of vortex sucking us in and dragging us down. But I believe in the triumph of the human spirit. Evil is everywhere, but good is everywhere. There are sheep, but there are lions. And most of the sheep have broken out of the pens and are following the lions, and will do increasingly. In Syria, for example, although this war is far from over, the attempt to destroy the Syrian people has failed. The Syrian people have taken a look and smelt the breath of those who sought to destroy them and have recoiled. And the plan to bring down the government in Damascus has failed. It's not going to happen. The regime will not fall. It's too strong to fall. It's not strong enough to bring out the war to an end. There is an impasse. But I believe that the Syrian situation is a turning point. And I believe that in time everyone will see it. Patrick is in Doncaster, maybe the last of our calls. Patrick, welcome to the show, sir.
Good evening, George.
Welcome. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say that, in my opinion, the central problem in this is, unsurprisingly, the United States of America vetoing Palestine and now obstructing the rights of the North Korean people. Is it not time that this imperialistic snout is removed from the world affairs of Palestine, of the North Korean people, to look after its own country, America, and leave everyone else to look after their own affairs? It's the world's policeman, but it's the only one that's doing things that no one else is allowed to do. Weapons of mass destruction, war, terror, tyranny. It's a disgrace.
I'll tell you what, Patrick, you're onto something there, because that's a point that hasn't been made so far. The United States economy is close to bankruptcy. There are millions of people unemployed in the United States. Almost 10% of the workforce is unemployed. More than 60 million people don't have health insurance. 30 million people are living on food stamps. People go into schools in the United States and murder their teachers and murder the fellow students and school children. There is crime and vice and wickedness everywhere in the United States. Wouldn't it be a good idea for the United States to concentrate on its own affairs? And we here in Britain, where evil also stalks the land in the form of the British government. Somebody went to prison for life today for burning 6 children to death. Some lowlife burned 6 children to death. Tony Blair burned thousands of children to death. And instead of going to prison for the rest of his life, he's swanning around making millions of pounds. Well, this evil will not triumph. Of that, I am sure. And if you agree with me, come back next week for more comment on Press TV.
Hello, if you comment, take your name and location with that number. And just make sure that your television volume is set to 0. So 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You redirect me, put through this, your phone number, and then we'll call you back.